word Rover, and what springs to mind is a faithful canine companion, one who always chases the postman, always fetches that stick, and always turns up for dinner at the same time every day. It's what you call reliability. It has been a long time though since you could apply those levels of reliability to Rover the car. But apparently all that is due to change with the arrival of the new Rover 75. To say that this is the best looking Rover for absolutely years. In fact, it looks a little similar to the new Jaguar S-Type. Okay, it looks very similar, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing. But putting the S-Type aside, you can see there's more than a hint of the old Rover P60. That's the fantastic classic that Her Majesty the Queen likes to drive around in. Now, besides the retro throwback that this car has obviously got, you get lots of lovely chrome, shiny trim, just a hint of curve in the right places, strong flowing lines, and check out these wonderful mirrors. Oh yes, this car will bring a misty tear to the eye of many a nostalgic motorist. And the interior is just as stylish as well. Rover have really gone all out to be very bold with this car, and I do think it works. There's a nice use of shapes and contours. There's generous use of wood here on the fascia and also on the dash, which houses 4 air vents and the passenger airbag. Now look how cleverly as well they've managed to combine the old and the new. You've got deep hooded dials that are based on a classic watch theme, but a very modern satellite navigation system and a digital onboard computer. In a nutshell, or should I say one nutshell, the interior oozes class and comfort. And if you're the creative type and want a little self-expression, then you could opt for the club or connoisseur packages. These give you the chance to choose your very own two-tone leather upholstery. It's all a bit too much for me though, I'm afraid. Now this is the 2.5 litre KV6 connoisseur model. Now it pulls off smoothly enough, but once it's underway it feels a little bit disappointing. The engine doesn't quite pick up as quickly as you would like. It feels a little bit lethargic. Now I haven't driven either the 1.8 or the 2 litre models, but the performance from this engine suggests to me that they may feel quite sluggish. But if it's not an extra kick of power that you're after, then the Rover 75 is a solid, reassuring drive. When you get the 75 up into the mid-range, it really does pick up, but it's not going to make the hair on the back of your neck stand on end. But it is good for cruising up the motorway or coasting along meandering country lanes. What equipment you get depends on what 75 package you go for, and there are plenty to choose from. And if it's extras you're after, then they're just there for the taking. Things like air conditioning, 15-spoke alloy wheels, an upgraded stereo, satellite navigation system, heated seats. The list goes on and on and on. But I have one question for Rover. Why, in a car that really is a luxury car, are there no electric windows for the rear passengers? The Rover 75 starts at just over 18 grand on the road for the 1.8 litre classic model, and that rises to around 26 grand for the 2.5 litre and the 2 litre V6. And that's good value considering the 3 litre V6 Jag starts at around 28 grand and the BMW 5 Series starts at around 25 grand. Back inside, the power steering uses servo-assisted racks with quick ratios. And what does all that mean, I hear you ask? Well, it makes the steering extremely responsive. It's light and it is very easy to handle. Yet it doesn't have any tendency to oversteer, nor does it pick up every single lump and bump on our lovely British roads. And the chassis on this car is very stiff, and when you combine that with the BMW rear axle, which has been especially designed for the 75, you get a kind of smooth, assured driving experience that's jolly nice indeed. The Rover is the kind of car you'd describe as solid. It's got a good engine, it handles well, it's certainly luxurious, and lots of effort has been made to return to the classic Rovers of the past. But there's still something missing. The ingredients are all there, but they just don't seem to complement each other. Now, whether you would like the 75 depends on what you want from your drive. If you want to make heads turn as you arrive in the executive car park instead of meandering in unnoticed, if you want to stroll instead of sprint, and if you want your interior to say more than your exterior, then it's probably worth a look. However, I can't see many creative types driving the 75, rather more your insurance brokers and middle management. And that's probably just the kind of market that Rover needs to attract if it's to retain that safe, solid and reliable image.
It's amazing to think that the management of two such influential car companies as Rover and BMW, which are effectively the same company anyway, could go to such extraordinary lengths to completely overshadow the launch of a new model, and a model that could be the saviour for Rover cars. Now, I'm talking about the new Rover 75. It's our first chance here today to see it, and your first chance on network television to review just how good the Rover 75 could be. And it could be the saviour for the Rover car company. Now, in case you've been out of the country for the past couple of weeks or been asleep, the boardroom battle at BMW, which led to the removal of Chairman Bernd Pischrieder, are the problems that we're talking about. Bernd Pischrieder was the guardian angel for Rover cars. But what we want to see is whether Rover have succeeded in producing an executive express, a car that can take on the likes of BMW, Audi, Mercedes, and even the Alfa 156. On first looks, the car seems big, grand, and with a somewhat regal presence to it, not unlike the Rovers of the 1950s and 1960s, and that is completely intentional. This car wouldn't look out of place parked outside number 10 Downing Street. It also reminds you very much of the new Jaguar S-Type, a sweeping rear end, lots of chrome on the exterior, and those two front headlights, and rather interesting that both cars were launched at the same time at the British Motor Show. The 75 is a replacement for both the 600 and 800 in the Rover range, and in terms of size it sits slap bang in the middle of those two cars. It's bigger than a 3 Series, an Audi A4 or a Mercedes C-Class. So maybe this car is beginning to move into the next segment, a 5 Series size car for the price of a 3 Series one. Now, stepping inside the 75 is almost an event in itself. It's almost retro styling gone completely mad, but personally I love the wonderful styling inside here. Lots of chrome, lots of wood. You can have the option of leather, and these gorgeous oval dials with the cream background are so reminiscent of the Art Deco era of the 1920s and 1930s. Now, you can choose from a choice of 3 different trim levels. There's a basic classic, there's the club, which is this particular model, and the most luxurious connoisseur versions. However, it's just been announced that the cheapest classic model will not be available back in the UK until the end of the year. Why, oh why, do they shoot themselves in the foot? The 75 does drive very well. It's smooth, it's quiet, and the handling really is as good as Rover claim. Now, we've had some pretty awful road surfaces to contend with here in Spain, but the 75 has just soaked them up with ease, and on the motorway at cruising speeds there's hardly any wind noise into the cabin. Now, talking to one of the Rover executives at dinner last night, he said that Rover might just go back into the North American market with 75, and you can imagine this car on the roads of America. It's almost been engineered and designed with that slightly in mind, and surely the Americans would love it. The 75 is a car that, if you want to push it hard and have a bit of fun in, you certainly can. The steering is nicely weighted. It has a smooth feel over differing surfaces. The gearbox, though, is perhaps not as slick as I would have liked, but maybe it's just the one that we've got on the test car here. This new 2-litre V6 power plant in the 75 is very smooth, it revs freely, but for me, it just lacks a little bite. A bit extra power would be nice. The car to go for, I would think, will be the 2.5 V6, which has a lot more power, a lot more oomph, and will be the car to give you enjoyment. Now, the starting point of a car is, of course, its chassis, and in the 75, it's excellent. It's 2.5 times stiffer than the Rover 600, and going around these bumps and bends here, we found absolutely no body flex, and combined with BMW's superb rear Z-axle, it makes a great all-round package. So once you're safely sat inside your mini Bentley, you can see how well the car is equipped. Twin front airbags, electric windows, electric mirrors, radio cassette, leather steering wheel, and so the list goes on. The seating position is fully adjustable, but despite these seats being like armchairs, long-range comfort could be a problem. Rover have invested heavily in the 75, of course with the help of BMW, and £700 million has gone in design, development and the facilities at Oxford where the 75 is built. BMW bought Rover for £400 million and has so far invested £4 billion in the brand. But it's Rover's huge losses which cause the demise of the BMW bosses. Estimates of Rover's losses range at anything from £200 to £400 million. Whatever it is, it's certainly a huge amount of money. So the overall feeling is that Rover have produced a winner. With the 75 you can have some rather wacky colour schemes like this top-of-the-range yellow connoisseur. But the key question is, who will actually buy the 75? They need to get away from that local vicar who drives a Rover feeling and tempt new buyers into the mark. They need to tempt buyers away from the likes of BMW, Mercedes, Audi and even the Alfa 156. Prices have just been announced for the new 75. They start at £18,225, ranging to £25,625 for the top-of-the-range connoisseur model. But would it tempt, say, a 30-something dashing executive from an Alfa 156? Well, perhaps not. But if the 75 becomes your company car and it's sat at home in your driveway, be sure that the neighbours will be giving it some envious glances.
The lengths we go to on Men and Motors to bring you the extraordinary road tests. I hope you appreciate it. As you might have gathered by the rather unusual scenery behind me, we're in Finland, right at the top of Finland. In fact, we're about sitting on the Arctic Circle. And we've come in search of a very special car. I feel a bit like Scott of the Antarctic. I certainly feel cold enough for it. Let's go and see if we can find this car in amongst all this snow. It's got to be around here somewhere. Let's have a look. Aha! Got you. I knew I'd find it. So here we have it, ladies and gentlemen, the all-new Peugeot 607 executive car. A car that has an exceedingly tough task on its hands. Peugeot didn't really want us to drive it until tomorrow, but as there's only about 3 hours daylight over here, I told them time was of the essence. So let's get in it and let's get away and drive it. Welcome to my winter wonderland of snow. Isn't this marvellous? Well, the good news is that it's finally daylight, and the other good news is that we put the 607 to test on tarmac roads last night. It isn't actually snow everywhere here, and the initial reports were very good. The car drives as you'd expect of an executive. Peugeot are very sensibly being very realistic about their ambitions. They're not actually going for the German big boys, but they're aiming for the Vauxhall Amiga, the one mass-produced manufacturer that stayed in the executive sector and done very well. Peugeot believe that their new 607 has got the style, the price and the equipment to make a big dent into Vauxhall sales. Peugeot have invested so heavily into technology for the 607 that they actually claim it's got more computer technology on board than an Airbus jet. One of the big safety features is emergency braking assistance that improves the car's stopping distance by a significant 25%. I also like the fact that the hazard flashes come on in an emergency braking situation to warn following vehicles of the potential danger. And how about a warning sensor that lets you know if any of the pressure in the forward tyres drops? Of course, the 607 has all the usual executive toys like navigation system, cruise control, a telephone with a special emergency call button, and it's also one of the cleanest cars for emissions on the road. But the real pièce de résistance of the safety air technology is that the car's fitted with the very clever electronic stability program. Once you're inside the 607, there is no doubt that it is a genuine contender for the executive class. It has everything you'd expect and stands very favourable comparison with the interiors of the BMWs and in fact the Mercedes. What I particularly like about it is how well the leather and the wood blends together. It looks very natural, it's very warm and inviting. What I also like is the simplicity of the layout. It's all easy to the eye, easy to touch, everything's in the right type of place. I also like the shape of it. There's a lot of curves to the dash and it has a very, very comfortable feel about it. I really have to say this ESP is the business. I'm driving on what can be only described as sheet ice with a covering of snow, and it's handling remarkably. It's only when you really push it that you can feel the back end go, and then it gets corrected again by the system. This is a really practical, genuine benefit to the ordinary driver. The 607 gets off to a flying start because it's a big car with genuine road presence, and that's courtesy of some very neat design cues that come from the drop-dead gorgeous 406 coupe. I particularly like the very bold lights at the front. They're slightly reminiscent of the lights on the 206, which has made that such a leader in the style stakes. And at the rear, it has definite shades of the 406 coupe, and that can't be bad. You get a choice of 3 new engines. There's a 2.2 petrol, a 2.2 turbo diesel, and a new 3-litre V6, all of which seem to perform pretty impressively from the short drives that we've had of them. This Peugeot is very, very big. Take a look at the back for room. Now, I may not be the biggest, but this really is an awful lot of knee room, head room, arm room. This is a very comfortable place to be for a passenger. But the biggest of it all is the boot. It's absolutely huge. There's more room in the boot than in my living room. So, the million-dollar question is the undeniably stylish Peugeot 607 capable of making a dent in the executive car market? I think it is, but I think the key issue is price. If they can get a price around about $19,500 for the entry-level model when it arrives in June, I think they've got a very good chance of definitely denting Amiga sales. I even think there's a potential to take sales from the German big boys, because there's got to be a few of those people that want something a little different and aren't totally obsessed with the old badge. Anyway, that's the end of this report. The only thing that's really worrying me is that Peugeot seem to be expecting me to stay in this teepee, which looks rather bleak. But there again, there have been people telling me for years that I really needed a teepee. I think they meant a teepee.
It's something that's very easily done. It's just a little white lie, no big deal, and we've all done it. Somebody asks you what you drive and you just say a GTI. You lead them to believe that it's a VW, a Peugeot or some other hot hatch. Why? Because you know they're trying to weigh you up, and they may not have quite the same opinion if they discover it's a Nissan Almera GTI. The Almera GTI was launched at the Geneva Motor Show in March '98 and has since been refreshed with some interior and exterior styling enhancements. The Nissan is designed to appeal to the young, adventurous driver, so it's built to compete with the market leaders, cars like VW's Golf GTI and the Peugeot 306 XSI. Still, we shouldn't be too hard on the Nissan because it is a very tidy little car, and you shouldn't be embarrassed if you choose to drive one. Just don't expect people to want a second look at it. Even with its deep integrated bumpers, the rally-inspired skirts on the side and the sporty spoiler at the rear, I don't think anybody will take your handbrake turns seriously. Still, it is supposed to be a sporty car, and who am I to argue with the designers? I just can't imagine you getting white knuckle ride performance out of it. Still, I'm prepared to give it a chance. Well, I've got to admit that straight away you slip into these contoured sporting seats that also have lumbar and pelvic support, which isn't bad at all. And there does seem to be plenty of room here in the cabin, but I'm afraid that that's down to the rather long and unsporting nature of its design. As for the interior trim, well, I'm not too keen. Far too much black, as usual in cars like this. But there is a generous amount of storage space, plenty of little cubby holes for you to keep all your junk in. The other stuff, such as this 4-spoke steering wheel, driver's airbag, electric door mirrors, and electric front window, is pretty much what you get in most types of GTI. But you do get a few nice extras as standard. White instrument dials, air conditioning, electric sunroof, and a 6-speaker CD player. And that's pretty good going. And speaking of going some, it must be said that the Almira can go some too, if you wanted to. This is the 2-litre 4-cylinder 16-valve engine. It produces 143 brake horsepower and has a top speed of 131 miles per hour. 0 to 60 will take you just over 6 seconds, which means that it keeps up very nicely with the Golf GTIs and the Peugeots of this world. The handling, though, is one area for concern. At low speeds, it corners as if it's on rails, but then again, I can't think of many cars that don't at low speeds. And remember, this is a GTI, we should be expecting performance and superb handling. The problem is, once you get up to high speed, you really feel as if you could be driving on gravel, not the good old tarmac. It makes the Nissan definitely a candidate for traction control. But if you want a sporty little hatchback that's crammed full of extras at a very reasonable price, then you're going to have to face up to the fact that you could possibly drive a Nissan. But never mind, you can always just tell people that you drive a GTI. Who's to know?